Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Truth or Trend, where Dr. Vrzal and I try to decode the mysteries of the universe for you and decode how your body is communicating to you about some changes that you could make to get yourself into a pain-free life. And today we're really lucky because Dr. Vrzal is in the middle of his headache summit, and he's got some
Mhm.
amazing slides that he's put together, some really cool things that he's going to share with us today to help us get into it. So I'm going to pass it over to Dr. V mostly and just interject when he starts to get off the plot too much. So go for it, Dr. V.
Yes, and just apologize ahead of time. There's going to be a lot of V and a little bit of Dustin because he's got a little lag. He's in another country right now, having some technical difficulties. Uh, but I guess that was good timing that this is a prepared presentation that way. So ultimately, we're going to talk about colon and how that refers to the whole head, the headband type of a headache. Typically, if somebody's trying to describe a headache, this is the harder one of the seven patterns to describe because it is ultimately feels like a tight headband or it's the whole head. So they can't really say it's right between my eyes or it's on the right side or the left side. So it's a little harder to discuss that way. But the other big indicator that's going to go along with it is low back pain. And who doesn't have low back pain at some time at one point or another? And so, right, so we've got this quadratus lumborum, the muscles in the primary kind of big muscles in the low back. This is called this quadratus lumborum. It attaches from the lower rib, the 12th rib, down to the top of the pelvis, and that muscle will spasm when the colon is unhappy. So on this chart, it's right here in this quadratus lumborum, and it's really nicely shown just above the colon in the center of the graphic there. So we have another real good indicator, and we can watch what comes out, right? Poop is a great indicator of what's going on inside. And to modify what comes out, we need to be aware of what's going in, what we're, garbage in, garbage out. So ultimately, this is going to lead back or return back to what we're eating. And so if we eat too much garbage and we have garbage out, and it's going to show as, corrupted, non-formed bowel movements or stuck, sluggish bowel movements, these are indicators, probably going to be an earlier indicator before your back spasms. So we've got a great, nobody really wants to be paying too much attention to what's going into the toilet ultimately, but that isn't a good indicator that, we should be having three solid full bowel movements a day. I mean, after each primary meal, we should be eliminating and getting the garbage out. Yeah, I mean, it's some multiple pounds of fecal matter is ultimately what should be coming out, getting out of us a day. I mean, just imagine how much food we're chomping up and putting in there, and that we need to take those nutrients out through the small intestine, the lining of the small intestine, the large intestine, get them into the bloodstream, create energy for us, metabolism, and then get rid of the waste products. And there's plenty of waste products. So the ways that this is going to physically manifest for us is that low back pain, it's the whole headband headaches, cyclists and runners, IT band syndrome, the muscle, that blue muscle on the outside of the leg is going to get weak and tender when the colon's not functioning as well. So that's another sign that we have problems. The muscle on the outside, this blue muscle on the quad here is more associated with the small intestine. We're demonstrating the IT band ultimately there as the key player. The good news is we have a temporary fix in this large intestine 4 acupuncture point on the thumb there. So when you close the thumb and that the thumb web right where it ends, that's large intestine 4 acupuncture point, very prominent point in acupuncture. It's going to be weak. It's going to be tender and boggy on the side of the colon problem. So if you have a right-sided colon problem, which is the ascending, that's where the colon fecal material goes up, if you will. The right thumb is going to be tender. Right low back pain, the thumb on the right side is going to be tender. If it's stuck on the left side, which is on the way down, on the way out towards the exit, then and low back pain on the left side, then that left thumb web is going to be tender. It'll give you a little temporary relief. Doctors, chiropractors, I mean, I recommend this to patients or to people, that haven't been in to be treated. Say, hey, rub that, it'll get you some temporary relief. But the bigger win is identifying what it is that you're eating. That's where we want to come in, be that lifestyle coach, help them know what the triggers are so they can sustain the benefits and the changes. So again, we have the whole head, the headband pattern of headaches that is going to indicate that the colon is not functioning well. It's going to manifest at some point as low back pain in those quadratus lumborum muscles. So we want to make changes there. So some of the potential triggers, constipation. What's causing the constipation? I mean, the tricky thing about constipation, yes, it could be dehydration. It could be a hypothyroid. It could be an old concussion that is, compromised enzyme production. Could be too many omega-6s, like we talked about here, poor fat metabolism or trans fats mucking up the way the gallbladder is working, low stomach acid. Any of these things could potentially set up constipation, low back pain. So clinicians, that's the fun part ultimately, is to go backwards and work upstream, figure out what the underlying trigger is. And that potentially is where some of the other headache patterns that we've talked about come in. So then we've got fiber, some of the potential solutions, various fiber type products that are going to feed the good probiotics and help us eliminate properly and create some bulking material. And then we've got the pre and the probiotics that we'll talk a little bit about, and how some of the various ones are specific to what other symptoms you may have. So again, the muscles, the tensor fasciculata or the iliotibial band on the outside of the leg gets weak and tender, colon's unhappy, and then that quadratus lumborum, that big quadratus, right, square-shaped muscle in the low back. The colon's primary time of activity in the 24-hour clock is 5 to 7 a.m. So if we're only going to poop one time a day, it's usually right when we get up after the colon has finished our elimination, our detoxification through the night. And then we've got the L1 will be tender chiropractors. If the valves are stuck open, that typically tends to be more of a yeast conundrum or yeast problem, and that's going to manifest more typically as sacroiliac low back pain. Whereas, excuse me, L2 or L4 are going to be the circuit breakers, if you will, when we have closed valves, which is more typically going to manifest as that quadratus lumborum, that low back pain. And then C2. C2 is a home run when there's sinus issues. C2 is typically anterior on the left, tends to go anterior on the left when there's old concussions, again, because they affect digestion as well, and then colon issues. So we can adjust C2 and their low back's probably going to feel better. Their sinuses are definitely going to open up. But again, we want to look at why that vertebra is out in the first place. You have anything to add so far yet?
No, I'm loving it, man. This is all
Dustin?
great. And I was going to say, well, I would say if you are uncomfortable talking about poop or hearing people talk about poop, you're probably listening to the wrong podcast, because that is where, that's the starting point for everything. I don't let anybody go any further in anything unless they're having a good solid, at least one bowel movement a day, right? That is like the don't pass
Right,
go, don't
right.
collect any more garbage into your mouth until we get that happening. So yeah, I'm loving it. Keep it going, man. You're killing it.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, just imagine if you're only pooping, a couple times a week, then that toxic fecal material sitting in the gut, reabsorbing those toxins over and over and over again. So then the liver has to seize the same toxins 3, 4, 5 times instead of just getting rid of it and cleansing the blood and pooping it out, giving it to the sewer. So again, symptoms, headband headaches. We got the pounding headaches because of some of the GABA and serotonin associated. We're going to talk about that with some neurotransmitters and probiotics in a few. Again, high serotonin causes more of the pounding headaches. There's going to be a stress component to that. Arthritis is a leaky gut. This maybe is new news to some of you, especially if you're a low back sufferer listening to this. Arthritis typically is a colon problem. Or a leaky gut problem, where things are leaking up in through the intestinal lining into the bloodstream, triggering the immune system, causing inflammation. Those large proteins are causing an irritation to the joints and so on. So arthritis is kind of the long-term scenario. There's been digestive problems for years by that point, unfortunately.
Mm.
Again, low back pain, the outer knee pain or lateral knee pain, the thumb pain, any pain when people talk about pain in the wrist, they'll call it, or, on hand, anywhere along that whole thumb region into the wrist is that large intestine 4 acupuncture point, or LI4, acting out. That's a colon problem. And then again, acne on the forehead is a colon problem. Younger ladies, that's again, hormones can affect colon function. We'll talk about that, progesterone, estrogen, especially. Anyway, that's going to potentially that'll manifest when the colon's dirty. It'll manifest as acne on the forehead, and then there'll be browning around the pupil as well when the colon's dirty. Lower abdominal weight gain. We have a slide for that in a few. Consider wheat consumption. Wheat is not so great for the colon. All the glyphosate that's in there that obliterates the intestinal lining. We have weak stomach again because low stomach acid is going to then put stress on the colon. If the gallbladder's not moving bile properly to digest those fats, then the brakes go on. The ileal brake in the colon slows elimination down. So then we'll have a sluggish thyroid could potentially cause it. So we've got the chart if you're a clinician that does muscle testing or wants to put some of this together, the chart over my shoulder here with the boxes to try the gray box ultimately is what we're talking about today. So nice graphic of the pounding headache there.
Yeah.
with the hammers.
Quick question, Dr. V. You
So we
mentioned
got
high
low back.
serotonin and the
Yeah.
pounding headache. Do you find people who are on
Yes.
antidepressants that are serotonin reuptake inhibitors tend to have that type of headache as well?
That could definitely be a contributing factor. Yes, it's most typically the cortisol that triggers the high serotonin that will cause the headaches.
Okay.
So frontal headaches we talked about in last week's podcast. Frontal headaches is typically a high cortisol inhibiting the stomach, perpetuating high serotonin. So that will more typically be the cause. But yes, SSRIs could potentially contribute to that as well. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Oh, and so we've got low back pain in the flank area. That's a sign that your colon is not working as it should. And then we've got unilateral neck extensors, and it's typically going to be on the side of the valve in the intestine that's stuck open. So if it's on the right, it's that ileocecal valve that opens up to get undigested carbs out of there before they ferment and create too much yeast, which then again perpetuates a leaky gut problem. If it's on the left side, the left neck extensors, or that means the valve of Houston on the left side is stuck open. Again, trying to get yeast out of the large intestine in that case. So the ilio, small intestine, and large intestine. So that means yeast overgrowth in the small intestine will cause right-sided neck extensors. Yeast overgrowth in the large intestine will cause left-sided neck extensors.
Let's zoom
So,
in
I
on
mean,
that a little bit,
this
Dr.
is a
V.
really good indicator.
So
Yeah, let's go.
if it is right side, we're talking ileocecal valve. The first thing I think of when I think of a stuck ileocecal valve is Spanish black radish. That is one of the first ones that I go to.
Right.
Versus the valve of Houston, what are your first thoughts when it's the valve of Houston versus the ileocecal valve?
So we need to back up a little bit. You said stuck ileocecal valve. So we've got a closed or open ileocecal valve. Both are different conditions ultimately.
Right.
So when it's open, I'm thinking what is it? GI absorb for toxins.
Sure.
What is it called? Biofilm probalance, for yeast or
Yep.
Zymex capsules. I'm thinking anti-yeast supplements and sugar handling ultimately. We can go back further and look at some estrogen dominance also acidifies and creates an environment that's very yeast inducing or conducive. So we need to consider the hormones in that case. But yes, to lean into that, so right now we're talking about when that valve sticks open, that's a carbohydrate metabolism problem. That's yeast overgrowth. When you eat something that's feeding the yeast, I mean, I feel this periodically when I'll eat a protein bar or something that stimulates that. By the time I'm done with it, I'll have pain on the outside of the neck. And this is, again, I'm a guy that I quit eating dessert 40 years ago or something. More than that now, man. It's kind of scary to
Wow.
think of it that way. So,
Wow.
I mean, certainly if you're sitting down to a big old piece of cake or something or ice cream, you're likely to feel it in the outside of the neck there. And so that's a good indicator that you just fed yeast when that happens. And
Wow.
it's kind of a cool symptom because it happens almost immediately when we trip it up. So that's the open valve. You said stuck valve. That's more tends to be a fat metabolism gallbladder issue. So yeah, that's where we look at Spanish black radish, we look at colical, we look at AF beta food, symptoms, things along those lines. So the closed valve is going to manifest more typically as we're talking about here with the low back pain in that quadratus lumborum area. Open valve is going to manifest more as that sacroiliac joint, the pain in the low back when you sit for a long time, or have to be careful bending over to pick up the paper clip or the grandkid or that sort of thing. So the neurotransmitter is GABA. GABA is the brain's control of the colon as a very general sense. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a few. Again, thumb pain, whole head headaches. Again, lower abdominal weight gain is another sign that we've got chronic colon issues. So that infamous muffin top
Hmm.
is an indication that there's colon concerns going on. We've got a slide for that coming up. IT band syndrome, again, that's going to be more prominent in runners or cyclists. They'll be the ones to notice it. And if we keep ignoring these signs, we end up with again the lower abdominal weight, but arthritis long term. Forehead acne again also means months of colon concerns. So if the colon's dirty and has been dirty for a while, we're going to have that browning around the pupil. That's in iridology. That's all large intestine area, as demonstrated on this kind of blue group here. So that's the colon dirt, if you will, congestion in the colon. So Zymex wafers is a good way to bind that up, clean up the colon. The typical symptom when this is going on is gas, farting after a meal, for your kids or your spouse, feed them a Zymex wafer. It's a wafer. It's intended to be chewed. I think it tastes kind of good. I set the bar low and say, hey, it's going to taste about like cardboard. Get over it.
Right.
Yeah, I'd rather set the bar low and have them say, it wasn't that bad, right? So we've got the Zymex wafers, and now we've got the GI adsorb as well as another way to kind of bind up some of those toxins and clean things out, especially like undigested, hormones as they're on their way out, T2 ultimately, or some of the estrogens and progesterones on their way out get bound up nicely with that GI adsorb. Great way to modulate that stuff. Incidentally, let's see if this works. There we go.
Oh, look
So
at that.
this was this slide before AI was a thing, but outside of the IT band, there is like weak and tender and a parallel area of the colon that's spastic. So if you're trying to roll it out, if you will, laying on this, the IT band or that sort of thing, the spot on the IT band is going to be tender. So if it's up towards the top near the hip, that's the ileocecal valve or valve of Houston, side depending. And the thing that makes this fun is you'll feel the spasm in the colon, and then you can find the matching point, if you will, on the outside of the leg. You rub the outside of the leg and the colon will kind of settle down in that area. So it makes for a nice magic trick, if you will, a party trick. So that's how that manifests. So again, some of the symptoms: gas hours post meal. Transit time should be 20 hours plus or minus 4. So figure at minimum 16 hours, maximum 24 hours before you see the corn again. Ponder that for a second. So I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah.
a fan of corn, but it's a good way to track transit time. We talked about corn on the last week on the frontal headaches as a cortisol stimulator, and corn is mostly genetically modified, but it doesn't metabolize well, so it's a good way to kind of test transit time, if you will. Watch for it about 20 hours later, or your undigested. We don't want to see vegetables coming out undigested, but anyway, it should be 20 hours plus or minus. So the coated tongue typically is a yeast overgrowth. We have problems there. Outer knee pain, right or left lower quadrant pain. So pain right over the colon, if you will, or over the ileocecal or the valve of Houston there. We talked about those pounding headaches, arthritis. If we keep ignoring the low back pain, the thumb pain, the signs and symptoms, eventually we end up with arthritis and joint deformities that are a lot harder to correct. And then sinusitis typically is the colon, especially when it's both sides and turns green or goopy. That typically is a sign that food's not coming out through the colon. Sinus is another way of elimination. So if we're not clearing it properly through the colon, often will come out and manifest as sinusitis. And then lateral breast tenderness, whole breast tenderness. It hurts to hug, kind of, that ladies will talk about potentially. That tends to be more of a hormonal concern. When it's more specifically on the outer margin of the breast, then that tends to be more of a colon concern, kind of like that IT band or outside of the leg, much the same. And then we dove into the unilateral, the one-sided neck pain, which tends to be more of a yeast overgrowth concern. So we're learning from our back pain. We want to lean into this so that we can use these indicators to identify what the defect, if you will, the defect in our lifestyle is. So we're giving you some of the physical manifestations of when we eat corn or when we eat too much sugar, or we eat too much dairy or, trans fats that are compromising the colon or wheat. Then we understand what the consequences are. It also, the benefit is motivationally helps inspire us to not be excited about that food anymore, right?
Mhm.
So, I mean, like I talked about when I was 14 years old, I realized that I was a punk and I could not, I played very hard for 15 minutes and then I would quit trying. So I swore off sugar. So I kind of, my goal in life is to help other people understand these triggers so they can be inspired and learn from what the body's really trying to tell. So when we eat these things, we've got the 20-hour transit time, we've got the physical low back pain, the neck pain, indicators that say, hey, this is what the cause is. Make an appropriate change, eat more vegetables instead of the cake, or whatever the situation is, so that we can be our best. Let's thrive in this life, right?
Right.
So we've got the potential advancing complications of, get more on
No, I'm good.
that?
I'm good.
Or
Keep
just
going.
inspired? All right. So we've got the potential advancing complications. Clinicians, we need to understand this to inspire change. Ultimately, we need to know the consequences of inactivity, of ignoring the signs, because cancer doesn't happen, immediately. Cardiovascular heart attacks don't happen because they just stressed out about, what happened at work. That was a months or years of ignoring the signs before then the circuit blows and now we've got cells have mutated all over the place or the arteries are blocked. Again, that did not happen overnight. There was early warning signs for many years leading up to that stage. So let's learn from those so we don't have to be that kind of a statistic. Low back pain is a good indicator. Headaches, we've talked. I mean, that's certainly my niche in the 7 headache patterns. But low back pain, we're talking about this as a colon indicator that ultimately is going to lead to all the other health conditions if we don't take care of it. Hip pain, we're talking about hip pain. We'll talk about kidney a little bit in the end because that's the other type of low back pain. But hip pain on the outside of the hip is going to be a colon concern. Hip pain on the back and the glute medius, that's more of a hormonal issue. We'll talk about that when we get to the bitemporal headaches. Hip pain deep in the hip is more of a kidney psoas problem that we're going to talk about at the end of today. So we got that lateral knee pain, L4, which is low back, kind of the lower back. If you're not a chiropractor, that's that area as a circuit breaker. And then the second vertebra from the top in the neck, C2, cervical 2, tends to be related to sinuses and to large intestine function. Thumb pain is always, did you hear me? I said is always a
Nice.
colon problem.
All
So
right.
learn from that, right? It's not from opening the jar or touching the shifters on your bike or flipping pages, reading a book. Hopefully you're reading books too. We like books. So that's a colon concern. And arthritis, we don't make a change. If we keep ignoring the signs, then we have to look at colostomies, right? And get a bag hanging out of your colon. Yuck. No, thank you. So here we go. I mean, technology these days it's baffling how things are, information is coming out. Every single B vitamin is actually made by probiotics. That's a mind warp for a lot of people, it's fantastic news because the vegetarian, right, that has always been told that they can't get B12 if they don't eat meat. The reality is the lactobacillus reuteri. In fact, I was going to prompt you, Dustin, to have we've got the Akkermansia and the L. reuteri podcasts that we've done that are going to be relevant. Maybe those of you that are listening to this that gets your attention, those might be podcasts to go back to and listen.
Huh.
So that lactobacillus organisms create B12, and B12 drives methylation, which prevents cancer. I mean, so this is how cycle goes, right? It creates energy and mood. So we've got B1 through B12 that are made in the gut. So these are the individual strains. Plantarum, Lactobacillus plantarum for B2 is going to be calming. That's going to help with muscle production, mitochondrial function, yeast, anti-yeast, if you will. So we'll dive into this chart a little bit more as we go, like this. So the heavy hitters, Lactobacillus plantarum, is one of the most versatile B vitamin triggers. So we've got the B6, B2, and B3 heavy hitters in biochemistry and mitochondrial function. And then the bifidobacterium, the blue one there is B7 and B9, massive for keeping the arteries healthy and so on. And then we've got bifidum, which biotin, ladies, a lot of people are bringing biotin supplements in, trying to help their hair and their skin and so on, hair especially. And so again, that's a gut-based deal. We did a whole awesome podcast on Rudrite, and I say awesome because I learned a ton on it. And with Rudrite being the precursor to oxytocin, the neurotransmitter of love and bonding. So I mean, healthy colons are going to make a happier society as a whole, and healthier marriages, and so on, and relationships with the kids and everything really. And then
This is an
the
amazing
other
slide.
green B vitamin, or
I'm going to jump in and just say here that I mean, one of the things that I think we can take away from this as well, if somebody is constantly having to honk down handfuls of vitamin B supplements, maybe they should start looking at whether or not they have any representation of these strains. I mean, the plantarum strain is one that a lot of probiotic supplements are out there trying to replace. And we can talk about the ways that you could get these, as we did in the other episodes, specifically the bifidum and the longum we're familiar with. But I'm looking down at that B12 now, Dr. V, and Propionibacterium freudenreichi, right? That's not one that I'm familiar with. I don't know if we have a source for that, or if there's a food that supports that, or if we'll have to maybe go into a whole nother episode on this one. Yeah.
Seriously. And I think ultimately a lot of what it's going to come down to is having the fiber, right? Having the prebiotics to make these. Right. So we have, I mean, the fun, the exciting part as clinicians, as humans living in a toxic world is, yes, we can take these probiotics, and yes, you and I are recommending them and taking them. I just took some 20 minutes ago. So speaking of, if we're going to take a probiotic, typically we want to take them at bedtime. So probiotics in general, we talked about 5 to 7 a.m. is when the colon does most of its activity. So we want to take the probiotic, if we're going to take one, right before we go to bed, so that it gets to about the colon, and that capsule opens as it gets into the small or large intestine to release those probiotics. But ultimately, we need to feed them so that they continue to proliferate, right? So if we take a great probiotic and then go to McDonald's for breakfast, what good are we doing?
Right.
Or we go expose ourselves to a bunch of toxins that are going to kill the probiotics, antibiotics or any of that garbage. What good are we doing ultimately? So look at get the prebiotic fibers, right? Eat the vegetables, get the fiber in to feed all of these strains, right? So maybe we want to take the B6, we want to take the probiotic to facilitate that pathway, but again, big picture, we want to eat the organic vegetables, because pesticides compromise this, toxic metals will compromise it. Sugars are going to feed the bad bacteria, whereas the vegetables and the fiber is going to feed the good bacteria, the good fats, all the things we've talked about for, what are we at, 67 podcasts now? Everything we've talked about for 60 some odd podcasts is really the terrain that's going to help these probiotics, the diversity. We ultimately want diversity. A lot of the buzz is metabolic diversity, be able to digest or metabolize fats for energy, be able to digest or metabolize carbs for energy. As an athlete, I'm looking to be able to facilitate all those pathways, depending on where I am in a race or in a cycle. And life is a race. Ultimately, we want to be, like a race car, be performing at our very best. So have the prebiotics to facilitate, lactobacillus organisms, so that we can make B1. We've talked, B1 comes up in the book as a very common trigger for bitemporal headaches, for left side headache, and for suboccipital headaches. I mean, that's a really common pattern of B1 deficiency. So do we need to look at Lactobacillus plantarum or fermentum to make B1 ultimately? I mean, who doesn't want more energy? So, I mean, this is, like I said, this is a profound slide. I guess I'll email these over to you so that we can include this when people watch the podcast. They can download some of these slides as well.
Nice.
The infographics, we're calling them these days.
There you go.
So nice. So niacin, right, is for cholesterol and blood pressure and cardiovascular function. GABA production, huge there. B6 is ultimately the main one for GABA production, and GABA is what helps us be chill, right? Helps us think. Husbands helps us think before we speak, right? It helps us that we need to convert glutamate, the excitatory brain chemical, MSG monosodium glutamate. We need to convert that glutamate to GABA to shut the brain off and go to sleep and recover at night. So if that process is glitched, if our gut bacteria were B6 deficient, then we're not going to shut it off. We're not going to get the deep quality sleep, restorative sleep to be ready to conquer and slay the next day. So again, B6, B7 is biotin. I rarely see biotin as a supplement by itself test well for people. I see gals bring it in all the time. I don't know what your experience is with it, Dustin, but I mean, I had one that was $75 that I ordered from a company out of Europe at one point that I started inventory. But even that, treating the gut bacteria, treating the metabolism as a whole, thyroid tends to work a whole lot better.
Yeah, I've never
Do you
been
have
an
any experience
advocate
on
of
the biotin front?
never been an advocate of straight biotin. It's never seemed to do anything other than just waste people's money and make them think that they're doing something. And it's just such a small portion of what really needs to be there for them to get the result they're trying to get from biotin. That yeah, that's it's never been a big hit for me either. Although if somebody's going to,
Yeah.
that's why I usually
But
suggest something like the B Vitality with CoQ10 because you're getting all the other pieces that are coming with the biotin as so that it's not just one single component. Yeah, but I'm right there with you. I've never found biotin alone to ever be worthwhile part of a protocol.
right, right. And it kind of goes back to, was it 3 podcasts ago that we did multivitamins, covered multivitamins.
Yep.
And I find if somebody's doing a B complex, right, or a multivitamin with a lot of, sorry, but cheaper forms, the less metabolized forms of these B vitamins, I tend to see them be somewhat anxiety inducing. They tend to show, when I muscle tested, they tend to show stressful on the heart. So I'm looking at, so that's really where I'm going to test if somebody says, hey, is this, one a day, good for me. I'm going to test, the colors, the garbage in there is going to be an excitatory aspect to the brain. In other words, kill brain cells. Yuck. No, thank you. But it's
Right.
also going to be stressful on the heart often. So that's where I'm going to test those to see what the potential side, imagine that side effects of a multivitamin. Whoa, did I just say that out loud? So, I mean, the good news is side effects of a multivitamin are not going to be as catastrophic as side effects of a heavy processed pharmaceutical, and that goes in and blasts on your obliterates all these probiotics in the colon or, affects nerve function or neurotransmitters. But there's still potentially side effects when we take even the wrong supplement, believe it or not, as crazy as that sounds. So vegetarians, you can make your own B12 by having a good, healthy probiotic, healthy bacteria in the gut and have the energy, the nerve health, the red blood cells, again, which goes back to energy and stamina ultimately, right? B9 folate is going to drive that methylation pathway. And again, we need to activate the methylation pathway to activate tumor cells, tumor suppressor cells, so that we can kill tumor cells because we're always making cancer cells. We need to stay ahead of their formation so that they don't get the jump on us, because then we have nodules and problems and big league challenges to overcome. So we talked about B6. B6 is huge, and about 70% of probably all of them, but knowingly 20 years ago, when I first looked at this, about 70% of the neurotransmitters were very dependent on B6 production. So we want to see that. Those of you that are listening to this or working with people that are doing GLPs, some of them are actually adding B6 because that will reduce some of the side effects of your weight loss medications, right? So that'll help reduce some of the nausea and the gastroparesis, the sluggish stomachs, and things that would go along with taking a synthetic glucagon-like protein, GLP, 1, 2, or 3 for weight loss. So that's another way to potentially reduce some of those symptoms if you're going that route. Again, have a good healthy bacteria. Gut bacteria. So B5, one of my favorite aspects of B5 is it helps break down acetylcholine. When acetylcholine's high, then we've got anxiety and panic attacks and things. So, and we could do bifidobacterium bifidum, Lactobacillus helveticus, to help the body, help the colon make the B5 to support the adrenals and handle that stress response much better. Niacin's legendary. And Lactobacillus acidophilus is going to be the one that's in just about any probiotic you're going to pick up off the shelf. Hopefully a good strain that's still alive when you consume it. So as Dustin said, lots of great information on this. We'll infographic in the slide notes, in the show notes. When we take care of it, we have a good, healthy gut, and that equals a good, healthy you. Ultimately, our colon is our connection with the outside world. Remember, we eat food, we chew it up. That initiates the digestive process. Salivary amylase, initiates the metabolism of carbohydrates, for example, and the parotid gland initiates the chelation of mercury that we may be exposed to. So that starts the process, and then as it goes through the colon, intestinal lining, there's a single cell layer between the intestinal lining and the bloodstream. And so when that gets compromised, things get absorbed into the bloodstream. That's what causes the arthritis and brain fog and a lot of the degenerative inflammatory conditions. So it really starts in the gut. And the healthy microbiome may help support better nutrient production. We talked about B vitamins, right? Improved digestion, elimination, reduced inflammation, stronger immune defense, balanced mood and stress response, optimal energy and vitality. Ooh, who doesn't want it? Sign me up, right? So support that microbiome by eating a diverse fiber-rich foods. Again, feed the terrain. Incidentally, I do a blended smoothie with the vegetables and that sort of stuff just about pretty much every day. That is my lunch break. If I don't take a break, but lunch break at work is I'll drink a smoothie with vegetables and ghee and good fats and so on in there and protein. That's because I can do that and get one of my best meals of the day in about 30 seconds. I prepare them, ahead of time. They'll stay in my fridge for typically good 4 days before they start turning. So Sunday nights, I make 3 smoothies that get me through Wednesday. Wednesday, I make 3 more smoothies to get me through the rest of the week with these vegetables. And I bring that up because statistically, the blended vegetables tend to be even more productive at producing butyrate. The butyrate helps heal that intestinal lining. So all these leaky gut conditions we're talking about, ultimately where I'm trying to get with that is the fiber helps feed the butyrate, helps feed and heal the intestinal lining. The minerals are the glue to keep that intestinal lining and integrity up. So we want to keep those good organic vegetables going on. Stay hydrated, right? We need the hydrogen and out of water and the oxygen out of water, all of that. I mean, we are 70% water. We're supposed to be, right?
Yep.
Manage stress. We can't make the stress go away, but we need to help the body handle it appropriately. Move daily. Movement. Go for a walk after you eat, right? To facilitate, or use a vibration plate if you have to. Something along those lines to keep things moving. And then good quality probiotics. And we did say quality in there because there's a vast array in the caliber of probiotics. We want to, typically we want a capsule that is designed to not dissolve or open up until it gets to the intestine. That's part of how we can directly deliver those vitamins to the colon where we want them. A thriving microbiome can help your body produce the B vitamins it needs, brain and energy for long-term wellness, which ultimately is the goal, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
So if we keep ignoring these signs and keep ignoring what's going on, some of the consequences can be acne, AIDS, infections, alcoholism. This is directly out of a report from 1999. I'm sure this list is going to be 3 times as long with current, if they did a current list of it. Autism is a colon problem. Autism starts with mom's gut biome, unfortunately. So that gives us a target, a direction to make some change. Alcohol certainly affects all of that. On and on and on. Crohn's disease, cystic fibrosis, these are potential outcomes of inactivity, of ignoring the signs long term. Eczema, right? That's a leaky gut problem. Dermatitis, the colon is skin on the inside, if you will. And so colon issues, enterocolitis, again, means the gut bacteria is way out of whack. IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, means we're having trouble both with carb metabolism and fat metabolism. That's why it goes back and forth when it becomes irritable bowel.
Yep.
Um, this call said migraine headaches. I'm out to get rid of the whole term migraine headaches because we need to know what location it is. Multiple chemical sensitivities, that's a underfunctioning P450 pathway. So these are all concerns that, pernicious anemia. Again, we now know that lactobacillus organisms make the B12, and so then we would not have that pernicious anemia, ulcers, and on and on. Spondyloarthritis. So these are all conditions that had early warning signs that you now are going to be able to prevent and protect yourselves and your friends and family from by understanding the triggers and the causes. So we've got the large intestine meridian that starts at that LI20 right next to the nose there. That is the point associated with low GABA if we're going to muscle test. And then the meridian goes down to LI4 right on the thumb web, another very profound point in the large intestine meridian. So we want to look at anything along that meridian is likely going to be a colon problem. And again, its primary time of activity, 5 to 7 a.m. The QL, that's left quadratus lumborum is low back. A hamstring, the left hamstring is going to be related to rectum, incidentally, like hemorrhoids. So the left hamstring is going to be early warning that maybe you've got some hemorrhoids brewing. So muscle testers, I'll actually physically test the left hamstring by touch or specifically to look at, supplements like collinsonia root to help prevent those hemorrhoids and heal up that rectal area. You have something you wanted to add there, Dustin?
No, sir. No, sir. Let's keep
Mm.
going. Yeah. My connection's a little
Oh,
rough, so I want to make sure we get to
okay.
the end and my connection's still intact. So,
Okay. All right. So the neck extensors, we talked about that with the open valves. Chiropractor C2, L4, L2. Large intestine 4, I call that the money point, right? So I can't tell you how many people, a guy in the bike shop, I was in there shopping for a bike one time. He's like, doc, I've got this low back pain. I'm like, hey, rub your thumb web and, see if it'll go away. And he rubs his thumb web. Oh, hey, my back feels great. And, some might think, if you're a scarcity mentality, you might think, I just gave up some business. I could have, seen him. But the reality was, I solved this problem easily. He did end up coming in to figure out the foods. He referred a whole bunch of people because we were able to solve his problems. So that's why I kind of make the joke, like, in chiropractic school, they called the low back adjustment the $1 million roll. I think that
yeah.
large intestine 4 is like the $1 million acupuncture point, ultimately, just because it's just to make the point that it can change lives, and it's a fantastic indicator. So we've got GABA to talk about. That's a whole subject, podcast in and of itself. And then the C2. There's your lower abdominal weight gain. So it's specifically the lower abdominal area, not so much pregnancy kind of belly. So the lower abdominal muffin top, kind of low back, is going to correlate with low back pain, probably whole headband type headaches as well. And then if when the gut biota is out of whack, then we're going to potentially manifest as frontal acne as
Mm,
well.
mm.
Lower belly fat is your body's way of signaling imbalance, gut imbalance, dysbiosis, ultimately, if you will. So we want to address what it is that we're putting in to cause the garbage. Is it what garbage is going in to cause the garbage out? And certainly cortisol causes leaky gut and it compromises all of this. So much fun information here. We'll cover kidney a bit here just because the kidney affects the psoas muscle. Here's another infographic I created. I love these things lately. So when the kidney doesn't function, we get that deep hip pain, which can certainly manifest as osteoarthritis over time. But the key player here is that psoas muscle, PSOAS. Psoas muscle attaches to all five low back vertebra into three places to the three places on the spine. So it is a major low back stabilizing muscle, and that's going to get weak and compromised when the kidney is not functioning optimally. And so then the peroneal muscles on the outside of the shin is going to be compromised. The rector spinae all along the spine here, those are along the kidney and bladder meridians that run along the spine. The upper trapezius muscles are going to get tender. Think posture, right? Those are going to get tender when the kidney's compromised. Another legendary point here is this where the neuroma is right on the ball of the second toe, where Morton's neuroma would form, or there'll be pain there. That is a kidney problem at its heart. Often that's going to be sodium metabolism. I think we alluded to this one of the recent
Last week.
podcasts. We were
Yep.
talking about salt and potassium,
Yep.
right? So, so kidneys very sensitive to sodium and potassium imbalances. It's going to manifest as that toe pain. In fact, that's right. I did last week. I told the story about my hiking patient that I will get that toe pain and take him off out of hikes when he gets too much sodium or too much table salt.
Yep.
So these are areas, the psoas, the peroneal muscles, the sciatic nerve, right? The kidney meridian parallels the sciatic nerve down the back of the leg. So I find more success tracing meridians than nerves, and often meridians follow nerve patterns, and sciatic nerve is a perfect example of that, where helping the kidney, figuring out what's causing the kidney to not function well, will balance that kidney meridian and be the trigger for sciatic nerve pain when it's true sciatica. I mean, typically people are going to have tension in the hamstring and call it sciatica. That's liver. We talked about that. Um, so, or if it's just in the glutes and they call it, I mean, in the medical world, unfortunately, anything in the back of the leg or in the leg often gets named as sciatica. Look at really what is the pattern. Does it go all the way down to that kidney tonification point and Morton's neuroma point on the toe? For sure, kidney at that point. T12 is the circuit breaker. That's the vertebra right at the bottom of the mid back and top, right above the low back, if you will. So T12 is the circuit breaker for the kidneys. So much fun to talk about there. Let's do another
So
infographic of what the typical triggers are for kidney problems. So kidneys are going to be very sensitive to toxic metals, right? So toxic metals are the stressors that challenge the kidneys. One of my favorite examples of this years ago, had a patient that had already had one kidney removed because of the cancer she had. As I questioned, arsenic showed up as a primary trigger. As I questioned her a little bit more further on that, she worked at a restaurant. I was going to throw the restaurant under the bus, but she worked at a restaurant,
okay.
and they sprayed pesticides in the restaurant every Friday night so that there wouldn't be a bunch of bugs running around, or getting into the food and so on. Her and two other of her workmates had all had kidney cancer and had a kidney removed because of the arsenic poisoning that they were getting from the pesticides being sprayed at this restaurant every night or every week.
Wow.
So arsenic's big old trigger. Arsenic comes from cigarettes, comes from a lot of pesticides and so on, right? Contaminated growth. The biggie right now is rice, because rice is so water dependent. Most of our groundwater is compromised by pesticides. So this is a massive storage. That's why we used to use rice protein a lot. We don't use that so much anymore because it's so almost impossible to find healthy, clean rice. And so when the kidney's compromised, we have oxidative damage, which means aging, if you will. We have reduced filtration challenges on the kidney. We've got increased risk of kidney cancer, as I just mentioned, and mitochondrial dysfunction, right? These toxins are going to put us in that wartime metabolism, as researcher Robert Navio would call it, instead of peacetime metabolism, when the mitochondria is producing energy that goes into like preservation instead of producing it. The mitochondria go into preservation when there's toxins or viruses present. Whole nother sidebar. Interesting. Cadmium is another common toxic metal, often in pesticides. I've talked about that and its compromise in vitamin D production. The two toxic metals in cigarettes and nicotine, if you will, is cadmium and arsenic. So those are, nicotine patches right now are very popular. Test them for toxic metals if people are using some of those sources. And it accumulates over decades and really compromises the way the kidneys are going to function. Lead certainly, is out of gas now, but ammunition and different aspects like that. Fortunately, this is one that that's not as used in paint anymore and auto fuel, but it is still in the environment often, and that will compromise bone health. Lead tends to get stored in the bones. Mercury. So the good news between fish mercury and mercury in your teeth. The fish mercury, if you eat tuna, that type of mercury tends to hang out in the colon. It's a little easier to get rid of. It's closer to the exit, if you will. Speaking of colon and low back pain, when it's a mercury dental amalgams, which are vastly less now to have mercury in them, praise God. But that dental amalgam tends to vaporize and go into the brain and get stored in the brain tissue, which does not get eliminated so well with the DMPS or EDTA that people tend to use to chelate out. It will show that there's less mercury in the blood if they do blood tests, but it tends to further deposit that mercury in the brain, unfortunately. So I'm not a huge fan of those. I just had this discussion with a local great doc that does some really cool work. But we we were come from different perspectives on that one. So we want to keep the mercury out. If you're going to eat mercury, don't eat mercury. If you're going to eat tuna, things like Safe Catch does mercury test their fish before they package it. So there is a solution for you. So kidney is the other trigger for low back pain, again, because of the psoas muscle that gets weak. And so that's going to be, the deeper the L5 kind of low back pain, whereas the flanks, the muscle, the quadratus lumborum square muscle in the low back there, flank pain is going to be a colon issue. So learn from it. If you've got that deeper kidney related pain, then look at your exposures to cadmiums. And, I get some of this stuff from breathing exhaust, unfortunately, behind cars. Thallium is a toxic metal that is in auto exhaust a lot because it's in fuel. And so I use supplements to keep my lungs strong. Well, we've had less. Fortunately, there's been less chemtrails, but chemtrails often have aluminum, and cadmium and strontium in them to help us be more antenna-like. So there's a whole nother rabbit trail of conspiracy theory aspects, but that's getting pretty well documented now. It's coming out in the aware market, if you will. Uranium is going to be even, unfortunately, in granite countertops sometimes, or well waters. And then we've got nickel. So jewelry, about 30% of people are sensitive to nickel. So everybody's going to be sensitive to either nickel, aluminum, or mercury, one of those three, in the way that their brain responds. So again, 33% is going to be nickel sensitive. So then you're going to want to be careful on the jewelry. This is the type of person that's going to have chronic UTIs, low back pain from wearing their big cross that's touching their skin, or their charm bracelet that's or watch that has nickel in the metal. Most silver colored jewelry has nickel in it, so you are the ones that you want to be careful and sorry, but step up to platinum, or use something that doesn't have nickel in it ultimately. So lead, cadmium, mercury, and arsenic are very common. Those four metals have the strongest evidence in medical and environmental research for long-term kidney decline. So we don't want kidney decline. So eat your anti-inflammatory foods, your green leafy vegetables, and so on. Exercise to sweat it out. People like the infrared saunas. I'm doing infrared sauna a couple hours a day, sweating when I ride. Get it out and sweat it out in your exercise and activity. Get proper sleep so the brain can heal while we sleep. Don't smoke, duh. Rocket science there. And I wouldn't use anti-inflammatories. Figure out why why one needs anti-inflammatories, NSAIDs, and treat the cause. Get regular checkups with your great clinician.
So I'm
Stress
seeing
makes it worse.
I'm
Go ahead.
seeing for both of these cases, low back pain, whether it's colon or whether it's kidney, that clinoptilolite clay, the zeolite clay, right? That's in GI adsorb is a real win. Now I'm starting to see more and more. There's so many applications to having not, like a daily application of that, but definitely a return to that quite regularly for a lot of reasons, obviously across the board here.
Yeah, for sure. And another, less known, I mean, I often recommend it with anti-parasitic protocols, right? If
Sure.
somebody's killing
Yep.
parasites tend to liberate, they tend to hold on to metals and things and toxins. So, and sometimes that's why they're there, if you will. And so as we kill those off, we want to take, GI adsorb with them. During those hormonal transitioning years, it'll help bind up those hormones that are being detoxified as well. So it helps reduce menopausal symptoms. Progesterone, should have mentioned, is constipating. So progesterone is constipating. So that's part of why gals, everybody says it's the baby growing, but it's an exponential increase in progesterone that is constipating for gals, whereas estrogen is more yeast forming and acidifying. And so that's the difference. That's another way we can kind of get an idea of what's going on hormonally. All that to say, though, the GI adsorb works really well to bind those up and keep that stabilized.
Yeah, I mean, in light of all this exposure that we're seeing, I mean, it's one of the reasons I do 3 times a year a purification, 21-day purification, and I've
Mhm.
added into that purification the GI adsorb, right, have that zeolite clay to be able to capture all of this. So it's good to have I think an annual ritual at the very least to bring something in like that to pull up those metals because the exposures
Right,
are,
right, right.
yeah.
It's there. I mean, we can do what you can, as this slide depicts, do what you can to reduce those exposures and don't be silly about it. But we're still getting exposed.
Yep, yep,
I'm out trying to be healthy, breathing air that's not so great, and
right.
whether it's from the cars or from the airplanes or, whatever it is, the stuff's in our environment. So we need to do what we can beyond, we need to limit exposure, but detoxify it and facilitate those processes in as we're going through the life's journey.
Absolutely.
Whew. Yeah,
All
huh?
right. How many more awesome slides you got for us here today, Doc?
That was it.
That's
We
it.
are
Oh,
wrapping
wow,
it
we
up.
made it. Okay.
I tried to be a little bit more conscientious of people's time, and there's plenty more to share, but
Wow.
we'll
No,
keep going on another one.
tons of pearls in there. Absolutely. And I think, I mean, just the connection to all of those key points of information from your body that you should be looking at your colon, the key points of information about just making sure that you're supporting your microbiome in general. And there's just so much to this that excellent, excellent stuff. Thank you, Doc. Appreciate it. We should probably wrap this up though, for everybody. And you've got what, two more classes with your headache summit?
Yes, we've
Still,
got
yeah.
bitemporal, and so tomorrow night is going to be this the whole head headaches. Then we've got bitemporal headaches, which is estrogen metabolism, and suboccipital, which is thyroid. I don't know how I'm going to keep that to an hour or two. It's a 12-hour seminar, but gonna try to keep it simple for people. So yeah,
Cool.
a few more going. So we'll
Awesome.
probably parallel that with some of our podcasts as we go.
Absolutely. Yep. A lot more to come. Thank you all for watching and your comments. We really appreciate your interaction. We feel like you're here with us when we hear from you. So keep listening and keep telling us what we need to talk about next. And we'll see you guys in the next episode.
Share this one with your friends that have low back pain so they can learn from it.
There it is. All right. Thanks, Doc.